welcome to Free Hit, an FPL podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined by my co-host, Jace. We are back for the 2024-2025 season. Jace, give me your first reactions to the price reveal when the full game dropped.
All the players were a little more expensive than I thought they would be. I thought we'd get a break on some of them, like Salah and Son and all of them, just given their age, things like that. But we didn't get a break. We're having to make a choice this season.
Yeah, I don't see everyone having the same 5 midfielders for 50% of the year, which I personally was really excited about when I saw the prices, because I think there are some real decisions to make. Haaland being at 15 million really set the tone. I think there's a real discussion of Haaland versus no Haaland. Salah was a little bit higher than we thought, but I think Foden, Saka, Palmer, Son were kind of in the range that we expected. And you're right, it does get hard to build a deep team if you're including 3, 4, etc. of those guys. I think my draft currently only has 3 of that group. So what anybody in particular just like really leap off the page from the get-go?
I thought Palmer was pretty high. That seems aggressive for a second season to be up, like, because it's higher than Saka was last year, right? That type of jump just seemed kind of drastic, and I get that it was his breakout season and all that, but that just seemed kind of out there. I mean, do you agree with that? Is that because that was about 1.5 more than what we thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I think so. But even with that, just like double checking ownership today, he's 56% owned. So I think if he had come in at the 9.5 that you and I thought was realistic for a single season jump, maybe he would have been 70, 80% owned. That was the only guy really. I was listening back to our like team by team review podcast and some of the price predictions we made. We were pretty good, but Palmer we definitely missed on because he was the highest single season riser in FPL history.
Do you think that's why they did it? Was to make that record to like give us the headline, the buzzword, and all that? Like, oh, like Cole Palmer, highest rise in a single FPL season. Like, you'll never sing that.
If I hear that at Stamford Bridge this season, I would be surprised. No, yeah. I mean, he was the top scoring player last season from 5.0 or 5.5 mid to start the season last year, whatever he was at. So I guess if you're going to have the player grow the most year over year in terms of FPL price, the guy that outscored everybody despite being less than 6 million is probably a good bet for that. Maybe we should have been on that, but regardless, here we are with Cole Palmer at 10.5. The other big change, surprising change, is the ability to roll not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 free transfers this season, which is quite a difference. What were your thoughts when you heard this?
I rarely get to roll 1 transfer, let alone 5. I mean, I'm curious to see like who will actually do that. I mean, you could save up and have like a little mini wild card like every 5 weeks, which, if you're a stick person instead of a twist, you're a stick person, like, I'll stick with my guns and ride it out for 5 weeks and then have a mini wild card. I mean, that's what, 7 changes for a -8 potentially. I mean, that's especially towards the end of the season, when after you use the second one, I could see that being a big factor into how we're planning, especially with the fact that we probably won't have as many single game week and double game weeks this year like we did last year, given the schedule changes and all of that. So I think it's cool. Like, I'm excited that you don't lose the transfer after the chip usage and that you get to bank a couple extra. It makes you more flexible, especially given the competitive pricing that's out there for the players right now. So I can see a lot of people, going without Haaland, say, early and then needing 3 or 4 transfers to get him into their team. And that's an avenue.
I'm with you. If I think about, like, is this more fun or is this less fun? I think it's more fun because it's more decisions that you as an individual get to make. Whereas, if you have a max of 2 transfers, you're making a max of 2-3 decisions per week. Now, knowing that you can roll up to 5, I think the meta is just totally different and really shaken up. I am surprised that they went from 2 to 5 as opposed to 2 to 3, for example, to start out with. But ultimately, if it's good for engagement, FPL Towers is going to do it. And maybe this alleviates a lot of our headaches last season around injury reporting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Is this an acceptable like happy median based on what we were talking about towards the end of last season with your whole, transfer deadline and all that? I mean, is this acceptable to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, let's say I can bank up to 5 and we get late injury news on somebody and I've already transferred someone. I wish that they would change the pricing system first and foremost. But to your point, if they're not going to do that, I think knowing that I might have an extra free transfer to fix any issues does alleviate some of that frustration. Not all of it, but some.
The opportunity cost is a lot more important now than it was last season. That's the bigger price that you got to think about, because last season it was you didn't have that option, right? It was like you rolled it once and that was pretty much about it. But now you've got the hesitation or the temptation of not making a transfer for 4 weeks. And I can see some people doing that, and then they're like, "Oh, I should have brought him in 3 weeks ago, and I probably would have if I didn't have the ability to keep rolling this." Right? We had a use it or lose it mentality, and that's kind of gone now. So
yeah, it makes me think of our discussion at the end of last season about a player like Muniz, who we both agreed was good, but we had too many other issues and transfers to make. Like, I think it's more fun now if you can actually get him into your team because you might have 3 or 4 free transfers as opposed to 2. My question is, like, if you look at game week 1, is your goal with your team basically to bank 5 as quickly as possible and then play from a position of strength? Or are you going to like kind of play almost quote unquote normally coming out of the gate?
yeah, I'll probably play normally. I don't know that this is going to affect a whole lot of my decision making outside of this first selection, the wild card, the second wild card, right? It'll play a factor around those 3 time points, but throughout the season, I'll probably still play normally. Maybe I take a few less hits, right? But for the most part, I'll probably still play as aggressively as I did last season because it worked out.
Yeah, especially down the stretch, you were much better in terms of points and rank gained. Last thing I'll say, there's some changes to BPS. I don't think we really need to talk about them. They're not super significant. We have a mini league. FPL Free Hit Podcast has a mini league. It's a public league, so all you have to do is click to join and search the code ZDTLNG. That's ZDTLNG. I will also include a link in the episode description with that join code as well. Feel free to join. You can play along with me and Jace. I don't know if you've settled on a team name yet this year. I'm going to be bowling for soup again, so look out for at least that one.
Mine's going to have Johnson in the name. I know it's going to have Johnson in the name. I don't know to what extent, but it's going to have Johnson in the name. If you think about Spurs' team, we've got 4 players that have Son in their name. We've got Son, Richarlison, Johnson, Madison, So there's something. Johnson's going to be in there. I haven't formulated it quite yet, but it'll be there.
Love it. You've got about 3 weeks as of today to workshop that. First match is August 16th. Speaking of first matches, just before we get into position by position kind of initial thoughts on each tier, did want to mention the fixtures for this first 6 weeks. Teams with the best fixtures: Liverpool, Fulham, Palace, Southampton, Forest, and Villa. Teams with the worst fixtures over 6 weeks: Wolves, West Ham, Brentford, Leicester City, Manchester City, and Ipswich. So as you are building your first drafts, keep those first 6 fixtures in mind. All right, shall we talk players? Start with the forward line. There's really only one premium, and that's Haaland. And I think the big question is...
That's like premium plus. It's not first class. It's when you get the cabin to yourself in the airplane. It's like there's 2 of them on like super nice transatlantic flights, right? It's those. It's like better than first class.
Better than first class. Okay, the better than first class forward, brought to you by Etihad Airways,
No, no.
is
Oh, at least you didn't say Fly Emirates, I guess.
yeah, is Erling Haaland, 15 million right now, currently 33% owned. Is he in your game week 1 team?
No way. 15 million is so much like funding to put into one asset. That's just crazy to me. He's 33% owned right now, as of earlier, I guess. But still, that's a lot. I mean, that just severely limits you. And I've seen a lot of teams on the Twitter X landscape that's like, okay, here's my with Holland team, here's my without Holland team, and that seems to be the kind of the two templates people are working with, one without. But to me, the three that you've got, kind of in the mid price tier, Watkins, Isak, and Havertz, all can kind of make up for that. Because if you have Holland, there's no way you have another like decent striker, right? Like it just doesn't seem feasible unless you're really, skimping elsewhere.
My draft right now has Holland, Isak, and Saka.
Boo.
So I fit him in, but my first draft did not have him.
Why do you want to be with Holland? I thought you were very anti Holland kind of towards the whole build up to this. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I didn't want him going into the season, even at 14. When he was 15, I think that even confirmed that further. Like I said, first drafts were no Holland, typically Isak, Watkins, and then like 2 premium mids, so like a Foden, Saka, or Palmer, Salah, etc. He's got Ipswich at home game week 2. That is potentially the best fixture that City are going to have all year, and it's prior to the Champions League games that start in game week 3. So I think not only do I want him for that fixture, I think that's an opportunity to use the triple captainship earlier in the season.
You did mention using your chips early last season, so no bench boost off the bat.
Yeah, that's the trade-off, right? If Holland did not have Ipswich game week 2, I think I would have been trying to optimize for a game week 1 bench boost team. But now that I know I have 5 free transfers, it's not as difficult to make the number of transfers needed to get to a bench boost team. And I don't see why I would try to build a bench boost team with Holland in it. So if I want Holland for game week 2, I think that pretty much DQs the like game week 1 bench boost.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think the other thing, it's a lot easier to sell Holland than it is to get him.
That's very true, especially with those extra transfers. What's your opportunity cost bringing Holland in? Like whose spot is he taking?
It's probably Holland would become Watkins, so that's 6 million, and that would be probably Palmer in the midfield to start, or potentially like Foden plus. So I think there are a few 7 to 6.5 mids I'm willing to have for 2 weeks. Game week 3, potentially sell Holland for Watkins right when Watkins fixtures turn, because his first 2 weeks aren't great. And then kind of be able to upgrade somebody from the midfield. So that's my thinking. It's purely Ipswich game week 2 at home, triple captain. If you're going that direction, I think you have to start with him, and he's pretty easy to sell from game week 3 on.
With Holland in, what formation are you thinking of running?
3-4-3.
3-4-3.
The 4 midfielders aren't great. We'll kind of talk about it when we get to the draft, but I do think there's some value in the budget forward spots. If you want to jump there, I actually think.
Yeah, well, we covered the premium and the mid price. I mean, we might as well jump to the budget. While we're still talking forwards, you talking about mid price. I was disappointed that Mateta's price was so high, 7.5. He's in the Pascal Gross price bracket that just sucks. Like I really want to own Mateta, but that just seems like 1.5 too much to me. I don't know if you had thoughts on that too. He had a really good end of last season, but overall, I mean, if you look at the season as a whole, I don't know that warrants a 1.5 boost. Do you?
I think it's fine, but similar to Gross, it's like there's so much value in Isak, Watkins, Havertz, kind of on the higher end, and Again, I think there's a lot of value in Muniz at 6, João Pedro at 5.5, Chris Wood at 6, maybe even Cunha at 6.5, that I just don't know where Mateta and Solanke in this kind of no man's land of 7.5. Like, when exactly do they get into your team? It would only be if Watkins, Havertz, and Isak potentially had a bad fixture run, or two of those three, because otherwise, you probably don't want a 7.5 striker with Holland that's not as good as, those three guys. You'd rather go into the budget tier. So yeah, I just don't see structurally where a 7.5 forward makes sense, but I do think the prices are fine.
Okay. Well, I don't, but that's fine. I just think it's a little high. It's a weird price, and I'm just upset that I have to pay it.
Anybody in the budget tier, like, do you agree that there's actually the 6.5 and under forwards are, I feel like, much better than they were last year?
I guess it depends on who plays. Like, does Jackson's in that weird price bracket too, which I think is super funny.
He's also 7.5, yeah.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I don't know what everything looks like from like the starting lineup standpoint, right? Like, is now that Højlund has the 9, how's he gonna, like, he had a pretty decent season last year, right? Is he gonna break out? I feel like 7 million is not horrible for United starting striker, especially if they are going to have this sort of renaissance under Ratcliffe and all these new younger transfers. But it seems like a pretty steep jump. Muniz is 6.0. I think that's probably fair, right? Like you said, João Pedro, if he can stay healthy at 5.5, that's a pretty good option as long as he plays.
Yeah, I'm assuming João Pedro's the starting 9. From what I've read, it seems like this coach likes to play with more of a false 9, and the center mids kind of get involved a little bit more in terms of goal assist contributions. The other thing with Brighton, their defensive record should be much better this year. Like, De Zerbi was very much an offensively minded coach, and they even got a little bit better towards the end of the season on defense. But St. Pauli in the 2 Bundesliga, I think, had one of the better, if not the best, defensive records, which was part of their reason for promotion. So I think João Pedro for the forward line, yes, but let's also not think of Brighton as a bad defensive team necessarily anymore, like they would have been last season. I think Dunk is on the table for Bruggen so far and so forth. But yeah, Pedro is probably the guy that most people are going to talk about to start the season.
You're probably right. Ferguson's out until October, I guess, too, so that probably helps.
Yeah, I feel like for me, on the budget forwards, Muniz is in my team currently. First 3 fixtures: away Man United, home to Leicester, away to Ipswich, and then home to West Ham. So 3 out of his first 4 are pretty good, and 2 promoted teams in his first 3. I felt like he was very, very good in limited minutes last season. The Fulham striker presumably has a high floor. He was kind of my pick. I'm still waffling between him and Chris Wood, and I'll talk about my team a little bit. Chris Wood actually has he has the most projected points of any forward, 6.5 and under, through the first 3 weeks.
Really?
And has like very, very low ownership among that tier. So it's kind of a combined expected points versus effective ownership, potential opportunity, but it was hard for me to go to him over Muniz after the stretch run that Muniz had last season. Let's move on to midfielders. There were 5 guys I had as premium, kind of 9.5 and up. Those would be Salah at 12.5, who's 33% owned. Palmer at 10.5, who's 56% owned, despite the 10.5 price tag. Saka, who is 10, he's 26% owned. Son, who is 10, who is only 9% owned. And Foden, who is 9.5, who is 33% owned. Of this group, kind of putting the ownership numbers in here, Son really stands out like a sore thumb. He's the only guy in this tier that is not at least 25% owned. Why do you think that is?
I think he's getting old. I think people are losing faith in the Postacoglu engine a little bit based on how he trailed off last season. I've watched our first two preseason games, and I understand that they're preseason matches, but we were humming. 6 goals in the first match, two in the second, 8 goals. A lot of them scored by the younger guys. So the system still works, I think. But I think it's mostly probably age and just a little bit of a lack of faith, but a lot of opportunity there with Sonny as a differential. I know maybe they don't have the best first 6 matches, but their schedule's not bad. They start with Leicester away and Everton at home, Newcastle away, who trailed off kind of towards the end of last season too. We don't know what kind of strength they're going to be returning with. So I don't think Spurs are bad to go to kind of early on. But like you say, it's all people probably just think you can get more value out of Saka, Foden, Palmer, and Salah than you can Son at that $10 million mark, and that's probably the biggest reason.
Yeah, what do you think the price would need to be for Son to see that ownership number get above, kind of within the range of the guys? Because I don't even know if he's 9.5, if he's matched with Foden, that he gets to 25. I feel like 9, maybe you would have started to see a little bit more interest if people could squeeze him in next to two other premiums.
I think single digits, you're there. I'm a little surprised that Foden is as cheap as he is based on the season that he had last season as well. It seems weird that Son is more expensive than Foden. So I think those should probably be switched, and maybe they will be by the time we're halfway through the season. Who knows how that's going to play out? But to me, that's probably it. I think he is too expensive at 10 million to warrant having in your team when you got a Saka and Palmer right there for $500,000 more. I mean, do you think Palmer is going to be as effective in a Enzo Maresco system as he was for Pochettino?
Yeah, I do. Will he be FPL's top point scorer this year? I'm not sure, but will he easily clear 200 points? Yeah, he's still the penalty taker. He's still going to be one of the front three. It's possible, Maresca doesn't play with like a true number 10, so he might play right wing. But even seeing him in an England shirt in a slightly different context, it was very clear to me that he was still the same player.
Yeah. I mean, he brought that form with him. It's a shame he didn't see the field more, because when he did see the field, it was electric. I mean, he made a difference every time he stepped on the grass. So
agree. Every time that he touches the ball, he either dribbles forward or passes forward, and he will lose the ball sometimes because he is so aggressive in terms of like passing the ball forward and trying to create chances, and just the volume there is so substantial that even if he's playing right wing, I think he's still going to be playing a lot of balls in the box, still on set pieces, still on corners, presumably still on penalties, presumably. So there's just a lot of avenues to points that I think it is fairly consistent year over year in terms of his performance. Salah, I wanted to talk about because at the end of last season, you and I were both out on Salah, kind of thinking the age curve, a little bit of a decline in form at the end of last season. Klopp's leaving. There's a little bit of uncertainty in the team. We don't know. He comes in at 12.5. Liverpool's top of the fixture ticker, right, for the first 6 game weeks. I think I've kind of 180 where I'm probably going to start with Salah, just given knowing he's going to be healthy going into the season and knowing that Liverpool have this incredible fixture run to start the season. I think he's an obvious pick. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, given the opening fixtures, people have some decisions to be made, right? Like you said, you can't. There's no way you can own Salah, Palmer, Holland, and even the mid-tier options for the other spots. I mean, you got to really kind of pick who you want to lean on early on in the season and go from there. So do you have Salah in your Holland draft, or are you going to have to trade? You do have him in your Holland draft.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's not only do I have him, I think he's the game week 1 captain away to
really,
because Holland is away to Chelsea, which I think you can totally captain Holland.
I was gonna say he could score 5 on Chelsea easy.
Yeah, he totally could. But I think Maresca will play a little bit more conservatively than the Poch teams did. So, for what it's worth, of the premium midfielders, expected points through the first 3 games, Saka is number 1, 17.9. Foden is number 2, 17.3. Salah is number 3, 16.7. You have to go down a little bit to get to Palmer. He is 15.1. We should also talk about De Bruyne, who is 12.7. He's a 9.5 mid. Didn't even make the list.
We don't even know if he's still going to be here. He's got interest from Saudi, which everybody says he's going, and he's also got interest in the MLS. Like, I mean, do you think he'll be here come the start of the season?
Yeah, I think Pep came out and said he's staying, which, like, they did that to Joe Biden too. And
I was going to say, hold on. And Pep's about as truthful as most of those politicians. So
yeah. Anyway, the other thing I was going to say, Son is also nowhere near the top of the expected points list. So I think the ownership there does
reflective
make
of that
sense to me.
Yeah.
Mid-price mids, 7 to 9 million. There's some interesting names in this tier: Odegaard, Anthony Gordon, and Bumo, Eze, so on and so forth. Anybody jump out to you in this particular group?
Come on, you're gonna deny Madison like that?
James Madison.
He's early. This is where he shines, is early on in the season.
Is he in your team?
Yeah, he is right now. What's the saying? He's unplayable, unavailable, something. Those are like his 3 stages of the season. But the beginning is like that's where or undroppable, unavailable, unplayable, whatever. It's something like that. Beginning of the season is where he shines. So I like I said, I don't think a lot of people are going to go to Spurs early. So I think you could probably find some differentials there. So, but there's some good options, like you said. We've got Madison, Eze, Gordon. Those are 3 that are in my team right now. I think you've got some good budget options too to kind of help fill in the Holland hole, budget wise, like Gibbs White, who I was really high on, kind of in the middle of last season to help me get going. He's got Bournemouth at home first match, so not a bad option there. So you got a lot to pick from in that price point. I don't really have any of the premium ones other than Foden in my team right now.
Okay, so you have how many guys between 7 and 9 do you have in the midfield?
Between 7 and 9, I have 4 of the 5. So I don't have Saka, and I don't have Saka. I don't have Palmer. I don't have Salah right now. So, but we're in early days. We talked last season, kind of at the end, where I was like, I want to have less of a problem to pick, right? I want less options off my bench who I'm starting week in and week out. So right now I'm at I have 15 really good, or 14 really good. No, 15's right. Yeah, 15 really good players. I'm going to whittle that down to having 12 really solid players and then add that budget elsewhere. So you'll probably see me bring Salah in or, Palmer, one of those 2, maybe Holland. But right now I'm starting kind of at the base, working my way back up.
Nice. I think for me, of this group, I have 1 in my team right now, which is Eze.
Yeah.
I felt like 7 million for the talisman, penalty taker, corner set piece taker on an Ascendant Palace team is a great place to be. The flip side is you could say, well, look at Eze's non-Olise performance last year, and he was pretty not that great. But I would say a lot of those minutes were under Hodgson. So if you believe in Glasner, you believe in the formation that Palace was playing at the end of last season, the talent around Eze, even without Olise, I think he can still put up a double-digit goal and double-digit assist season for 7 million, some of the best opening fixtures in the game. I don't see why Eze would not be in almost every team. I think his ownership right now, if I look it up, is 33%. So he's one of the as the higher owned players in this group. I think a lot of folks agree with me.
Who do you think replaces Elise in that Crystal Palace lineup?
Well, I think it's they got Kamada from Lazio, but who also played under Glasner at Eintracht, but as a center mid. So we'll kind of see, does he play with Wharton? Does him and Wharton trade off? Does Wharton go further up the field? But I think he could play wing. They were also, obviously, they still have like IU that could play on that side as well. So yeah, it's a question. We'll have to see what they look like in preseason. But I guess I believe in the coach more than I believe that the loss of Elise will hurt as a production. For what it's worth, the top three midfielders in terms of projected points for the first 3 games. It's all coming from FPL review, by the way. I think that was something you and I learned at the end of last season, is that all the very analytics focused managers use FPL review. They give the next 3 weeks of expected points data out for free. So let's talk about them. Number 1 and 2 are both players that we did not talk about in this tier. Number 1 is Odegaard, 15.9 points. And number 2 is Bruno Fernandes, 15.5 points. And then Eze comes in at number 3 at 7.0 at 14.3 expected points through the first 3 weeks. Wrapping up the midfielders, best mid 6'5" and under. I think for me, it was Gibbs White.
Yeah.
Solid opening fixtures. I think the upside guy would be Nkuku. If he starts as the number 9 for Chelsea, he's an out of position mid at 6'5". Yeah, that's a huge, huge value. He'll be in every team if that's the case. The other guy I think is interesting in this tier is Leon Bailey. Diaby is apparently on his way to Saudi. If Bailey is nailed for Villa, which we don't really know because they have Champions League as well, it's going to start game week 3, but I think he's super interesting in this tier as well. Anybody for you, 6'5" or under in the midfield that you were looking at?
No, Gibbs White was the big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think we're agreed there. Let's go into defenders. Premium defenders, Trent, Ben White, Gvardiol, the 2 Arsenal center backs. Saliba, by the way, of the 2 is 41% owned, and that's Trippier, who is 15% owned at 6 million. Now, I think at the end of last season, you and I talked, and we said probably 1 premium defender and a bunch of 4 or 5 guys. After seeing the prices come out, we still agree with that? Or you think you're going to kind of switch up the shape of your team a little bit?
It's tough. I think if you classify the premium as 6-0 and above, maybe it's 2. Trent and White look both pretty attractive there, based on how they performed last season. You got a new manager with Slot, and we don't know how and where Trent's going to play. They open with Ipswich, as you mentioned earlier. So Trent could be a really good option to start with, and maybe you switch him out for like a White in a couple of weeks, or how you want to do that. But I definitely think you're pulling from a lot of the mid price and low price players like Porro and Gusto and Munoz to fill in the rest of the gaps, depending on how you want to set up. I'm surprised you asked the question of best 4.5 defender. You're pretty big on the Ipswich guy, right?
Leif Davis.
Yeah.
In the fantasy world, that Leif Davis was 4.0 because he was a promoted defender. He would be the 4.0 in everybody's team. So I see why they priced him at 4.5.
Yeah.
I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze at 4.5. He reminds me of a little bit of like Alfie Doughty.
Okay.
There are runs where I think he might be an attractive 4 or 5 option as a defender. He could get double-digit assists in the league this year. I think that's reasonable. I just don't see Ipswich keeping a lot of cleans. Like I said, he reminds me a lot of a Doughty. I'm sure he'll have a moment this season, but given Ipswich's early fixtures, they play City and Liverpool, as we just mentioned, the first 2 weeks. Don't see a reason to start with him in the team.
You said you're going 3 at the back to start. Does that mean you're only going to have 3 playable defenders, or are you going to kind of stick yourself in the same position as last season where you didn't have anybody on the bench?
Where I've landed, I think this one premium strategy is still the right idea. So I initially started with Trent because of the fixtures from Liverpool. Eventually, I dropped down to Bardiol. That 1 million I felt like could be spent elsewhere, despite the early fixtures that Liverpool have, like we've mentioned. Then I have 3 guys at 4.5 and 1 guy at 4.0. So the idea would be to rotate in the 4-5 guys based on fixtures. Hopefully, I don't have to play my 4-0. If I do, that's fine. And then kind of keep my premium guy and or swap out the premium defender based on fixtures if I want to flip to an Arsenal or I want to flip to Trent. Like, I think that slot is very easy to manipulate and rotate through this kind of group of guys.
Yeah, I think that's fair. No love for Ben White.
I think 6.5 versus either Trent at 7 or Gvardiol at 6. I think they both offer better value for different reasons. Trent's attacking upside is much higher. If you want kind of somebody that's more in the Ben White mold, I think Gvardiol does it better. The only reason he's 6 is probably expected minutes, where if you think Ben White's going to play all the time, but Arsenal has Timber back. They just got the guy from Italy. I think there's a chance that Ben White gets rotated a little bit more this season. So
yeah, maybe. I mean, he's going to be your differential in the Arsenal back line, though, right? He's 12% owned right now. Obviously, we've got a long way to go, so these numbers will change, right? So don't hold us to that. And then, I guess Gabriel is 12.5%, so they're kind of neck and neck. But I mean, if you're going to spend 6 on, right? So I'm going away from Saliba like I did last time. I don't think he's as good as everybody thinks he is, or as he thinks he is. But do you think White's, if you're going to go with a Gabriel, do you think it's worth upgrading the 5 to Ben White?
No, I do.
You think you'd stick with Gabriel and save the 5?
Yeah.
Do you think Gabriel gets rotated?
Yeah, I think he could be. If I'm at 6, I think I like Gvardiol better than the Arsenal defenders. If you want to upgrade from Gvardiol, I don't see a reason to go to Ben White versus Trent. It's very difficult for me to say that Ben White versus Trent is worth 0.5, but I think Gvardiol versus Trent is worth 1 million, if that makes sense. But Ben White is in the no man's land here for me. That's
you think so? Okay. He's in the Pascal Gross bracket. Yeah, okay.
Kind of. Let's move on to the mid price. I think the mid price defender tier, this whole bracket is the Pascal Gross bracket. Everybody from 5.5 to 5, I don't see where they fit in any teams at all. Porro, all the City defenders that are not Gvardiol, Ian Maatsen, Gusto, Munoz, Udogi. I think Luke Shaw is in this group. Lots of others. You were high on Udogi at the end of last season, thinking he was going to be 4 or 5. He comes out at 5. Has that opinion changed, or you still feel like 5-0, he's in your team?
My opinion has changed, but it's not because of the price point. I think Udogi is a great asset at 5 million. He's injured though. It doesn't have it, maybe he is flagged in the game. I guess I didn't look, but he's coming off a knee surgery. He hasn't seen the field. He's been in training, but of all of the preseason matches, he doesn't have a flag by his name, by the way. He hasn't seen the field yet in preseason, and he wasn't away on international duty, right? So I think he's still carrying a little bit of an injury. Postecoglou's being safe with him, so I don't know that he's locked on that side, especially if we keep Jed Spence and we just signed Archie Gray, right? We've got a couple other, Jamie Donnelly could be inverted. Skip could be inverted. Postecoglou's been playing with a lot of different pieces there in that back line in preseason. So I'm a little less certain that Udogi's going to get the playing time early on, and that's why my opinion's changed on him. I still think at 5 million, if he's playing, he's going to get goal contributions. He absolutely is. But for right now, I know Pedro Porro is locked on that side, and that's who I'm going to go to personally. I want to own Pedro Porro, and I think we're going to win the league this season. So you should back Spurs.
So you're fitting in. You said you have an Arsenal defender and Porro, so you're kind of splitting. Was it 6-0, 5-5? You're kind of splitting the difference there.
I told you this first draft is a lot of really good players in that weird price bracket, right? To see what I can afford, and then it's picking who I can live without, right? So like I said, you're going to see players like you said, like your Ben Whites go by the wayside. Maybe they're replaced with Guardiola. Maybe they're replaced with someone even cheaper, right? Like I said, I always lean towards having 15 really good assets, and I want to get that down to being okay with only having 13 or 12 really good assets, and being okay with not having two playable assets to have better assets for the first 11. So that's where I'm at right now. So I think you can easily afford a Munoz, Pedro Porro, Alexander Arnold, Guardiola, and Gusto backline, and you'd be really really set. Like I think you can fit those players in and around some of the premium options if you skimp a little bit elsewhere. But that's you just again have to pick where you wanna invest and kind of who you're gonna build your team around. Is it going to be Holland? Is it going to be a mix of like you've got Holland, Salah, and Saka? We got a lot of choices to make this season.
Yeah. The more you share, the more I'm really interested to see what your draft looks like.
Yeah. Well,
I think yours is very different right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to be very far apart on some of these guys.
Well, it depends because you might talk me into starting with Holland now after we had this conversation. But
yeah,
like I said, I wanted to see who I could afford, what the team looks like without any of the premiums, right, and see how that goes. But my big issue is the next section, the goalkeepers. To me, I don't see. They all seem like they're in that weird price bracket. You've got Leno at 5 million, and you've got the premium keepers at 5.5, and you've got a lot of them in that price bracket. So I don't know who the budget goalkeeper is.
There's no 4.0 starter as of today. Hopefully, with 3 weeks to go,
that changes, right? Someone signs somebody, right?
Yeah. I don't want to say I hope someone gets injured, but it's possible that someone gets injured and we have a new starter. I think also, Wolves would be somewhere to look if Bentley starts over Jose Sa. I don't think that will happen. So we'll see. So I think it's a decision of, do you want to keep a 4.0 keeper and just sit him on your bench and then you don't rotate your 4-5 keeper, or is it worth it to spend an extra 0.5 and rotate the keeper? I right now have gone with Flecken and Henderson from Palace, or Johnstone, whoever the Palace starter ends up being. They have pretty good fixture rotation. They're both 4-5. I'm anti spend more than 4.5 on a goalkeeper, but
Brentford's got some of the worst 6 fixtures to start the game. So you plan on going with Johnstone or?
Yeah, the rotation between the two teams is much better than any one of them individually. So it helps Brentford's first little bit. But I was going to say, I think I'm stuck between, do I get a keeper that will not play that's 4.0 to potentially get a better midfielder, or do I want to have 2 4-5 starters? And I think I want to have 2 4-5 starters as of today. But those are the 4-5s that Sanchez from Chelsea is also being talked about. We might buy another keeper, but if we don't, he seems like the number one. He's 4.5 as well. That would be obviously top 16 with 4.5 keeper, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if you said no 4.0 starters, you're assuming Ariel is going to start for West Ham. Fabianski is 4.0, right?
I was going to say, I think Fabianski, the one thing you want to check is the ownership, because if you get the 4.0 goalie that everyone owns and he doesn't start, he gets sold a lot.
And you lose that immediately. Yeah, you gotta be careful there. That's for sure. I think the goalkeepers are really tough. You're in a really tough decision area there, given the price points they're in at the rest of the field. You're gonna have to make some concessions somewhere, and you feel like a lot of people are gonna target the goalkeepers to make those concessions.
Honestly, I think it'll be, like I said, in defense. I don't think a lot of these 5.0 to 5.5 guys are going to be owned. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in the 4.5 defender tier. Right now, I have...
Do you know who the highest owned goalkeeper is right now?
Who's that?
The U.S.'s own Matt Turner.
Oh yeah, I think he's the most popular 4.0 keeper at the moment.
24.6%. Yeah. Even though they signed a new keeper.
Yeah. And that's the guy, unfortunately, like you don't want to own because he's going to get sold. He's going to be 3.9 in 2 weeks, and you're just going to be down 0.1 million.
I thought Pickford would be higher owned, 18%. I mean, there's no one that's massive, no starter that's massively owned. So I think you got a lot of people divided there. There's no consensus. So it's interesting.
Any 4-5 defenders that stuck out to you or that you have in your team? I have Mikolenko from Everton, Anthony Robinson because of Fulham's fixtures, and Dan Burn, which I think are 3 of the highest owned 4-5 defenders as well.
Robinson's a great pick. He was Fulham's player of the season last season, voted by the fans. I think he works really hard. Liverpool have looked at him really hard. He's drawn the attention of bigger clubs. So, I think he's got the pedigree there. If he stays is the big question. He's been tied to a couple of transfers, but if you're saying who's my go-to 4.5, I would say Robinson. What about Munoz at 5?
Yeah, again, I just can't justify 5 million for a defender given I'd rather put an extra 0.5 in midfield than in defense as of today. That could change. Munoz
as of today.
Goal and an assist in game week 1, and then I look like an idiot. But if you look at Anderson, for example, from Palace's 4.5, his expected points for the first 3 weeks is 7.7. And if I go up to 5, I think he's still by expected points, at least in this model, he's expected to be pretty much even with Tyrick Mitchell as well at 7.7. So it's like a 0.5 difference for, potentially marginal return there. You want to wrap up with your draft that I would really like to see?
No.
I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it.
You go first.
You want me to go? Okay. Yeah. I'll go first. Goalkeepers, Flecken and Henderson, 2-4-5 starters, good fixture rotation. I like both these teams this season too. I think Brentford will bounce back. I've already talked about Palace. Defenders, Gvardiol at 6, 3-4-5s, Dan Burn, Anthony Robinson, and Mikolenko from Everton. It's a bummer that Branthwaite and Tarkowski were 5-0, but I think Mikolenko is a nice route into the Everton defense. My 4 million defender right now is Barco from Brighton. It seems like Estupiñán is injured for a couple months. He could be the wing back or left back for Brighton in that time period. Also, if Brighton's defense is going to be better, you and I still really like Tariq Lamptey. So if he's nailed, I thought he had a really nice end of the season last year and potentially offers some attacking threat. Midfield, I have Salah at 12.5, Eze at 7, Gibbs White at 6.5, and Kunku at 6.5, and Kamada at 5.5. So other than Salah, Eze is my most expensive midfielder right now at 7 million. And a forward line of Muniz, Holland, and Isak. So those are my 15 guys. So one thing I'm thinking about is Kamada in midfield is 5.5. He could easily be Morgan Rogers, who's 5.0 from Villa. Seems to be playing second striker in preseason if that holds. But he's the 5.0 mid on the bench. Could also take the goalkeeper down, 0.5. Could also take Muniz and make him João Pedro. There's another 0.5. I have various routes to get to Anthony Gordon at 7.5. Basically convert one of the 6.5 midfielders, either Gibbs White or Nkunku, to Anthony Gordon for the first couple of weeks. But I like the fixtures for Gibbs White, and I like the potential of Nkunku. If we get a little bit more information in preseason about him being the starting 9, he will be, I think, a very obvious 6.5 pick. So it's not as deep as the team I wanted at the end of last season, but if I'm going to keep Holland for 2 weeks, triple catch him in game week 2, I'm going to be flush with cash in game week 3 if I decide to sell him. So I'm okay being a little top heavy for the first couple weeks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What do you think?
I think he's good. I think it's probably going to change many, many times in the next 3 weeks. So I'm not going to hold it against you. I think you've got some good options on there. Like I said, a lot of it's wait and see on who comes in, who goes out, how the preseason tours look. If you're going to watch any of those, I'm actually going to see Chelsea play Celtic this weekend at Notre Dame. So I'll give you my full match report after that, Chris.
Mudryk has a new haircut. He's buzzed.
God.
See what that looks like. He might seem faster.
Someone's got to tell that man his hair is not going to make a difference in his game. Like he's still going to hit the ball 90 yards outside of the stadium.
The other thing the Chelsea Instagram account did was ask him what was his essential item that he had to bring on his US tour. He was like books.
And I'm sure he said it exactly, books. Like he's never read a book in his life. Yeah.
Sure. No context, one word answer. Everybody else is like, oh, like my favorite thing. And he was just like books. So I think he's like getting that knowledge up, which I pretty much respect. I mean, this could be a new guy. So if you go watch him, Michigan, just look out. He might be worth half of what Chelsea paid for him now. We'll see.
Well, we're still in Indiana. We're in Notre Dame, not Michigan. So
yeah, all right, fair enough. You want to give me your team, your draft?
Yeah, I'll give you my draft. Again, this is the base, the foundation, if you will.
Sure.
So seeing who I could afford and where I'm going to upgrade and downgrade. Top to bottom, Mateta, Watkins, Havertz, front three. No matter what I have, I think I will have Havertz in my team. He's kind of the one that we said was going to be an essential pick for the season. He was in really good form at the Euros, carried his form and confidence into that. So I think he'll still be there, and I don't see anyone replacing him.
Yeah. Sorry, did you say Isak was in there? Or
no. Mateta, Watkins, Havertz.
Mateta. Okay, so you do have Mateta 7-5 in there. Okay.
Yep. Right now, again, we're stretching budgets. Because this is using 100% of the budget, right? So midfield, I've got Gordon, Foden, Gibbs White, Eze, Madison, as I mentioned. Again, I think people are going to sleep on these Spurs assets at the beginning. If you recall, last season we went like 11 games in a row without losing. So up until that horrific Chelsea VAR decision, and I'm surprised you didn't start our conversation with the latest VAR controversy from the Olympics, because that's just right for me to put my tinfoil hat back on.
Nah, it was too early in the soccer season.
Too early in the season to go on the refs, huh? Anyways, I think people are sleeping on the Spurs assets, so I think they're gonna come out firing like we did last season. Hopefully we can maintain the momentum a bit longer. So that's my midfield and backline. Munoz, Pedro Porro, Alexander-Arnold, Guardiola, and Gusto. And for my goalkeepers,
you don't have a defender under 5 million.
I've got Leno and Fabianski. So again,
wow,
we're stretching the budget. We'll see who stays and who goes, but I'm struggling in the goalkeeper. Like I said, I'm kind of pissed off with the goalkeeper situation. I really want Leno because I feel like he's very consistent, and he's just like one of those guys I can always count on to just do the bare minimum of get me 2 points, So that's kind of why I gravitate to him. But like you said, it's tough rationalizing more than a $4.5 million goalkeeper. So we'll see how that goes. Fabianski's not going to stay. I just needed a $4 million keeper to hold his place. So like you said, the back line, there's no one under 5 million. In the midfield, kind of same, right? Gibbs White 6.5 is the cheapest, and I've got a weird Mateta Pascal Gross price bracket thing going on. But this is how I can maximizing the budget. I think there are a lot of places, especially the back line, to like you said, downgrade so I can upgrade a few other spots. So I think I'll have 2 premiums, whether that's Haaland and Salah or someone else, but I just don't know who's going to stay, who's going to go. I really like the back line, and this is where I always get stuck, is I'm like, oh, these are all really solid players.
Yeah.
But I'm only going to play 3 of them.
Yep.
So
it almost
figure out who those 3 are.
Like if you could take like Gusto, who has a bad game week 1 fixture, not sure where he's going to be in the lineup. He'll probably start, but we don't know. like if he becomes Robinson or Dan Burn or like somebody with a really strong game week 1 fixture, that seems like a bench boost team game week 1.
Yeah,
For the
exactly.
most part.
Yeah, it's a good point.
If you're picking for game week 1 fixtures, like I think maybe that's where you can tweak and optimize and then use that chip right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we talked about at the end of last season, right? Was bench boosting off the bat to get rid of any sort of uncertainty in the starting lineups. So there's definitely that in mind here. But like you said, it'd be easy to downgrade a Holland than it would be to upgrade a Watkins or a Havertz or even a Mateta to a Holland or one of the midfielders to a Salah. So I totally take your point that going that direction would be much easier without taking too many hits. So we'll see where we land. But
yeah, you could make an argument like if you have Gavard and you have Foden, you have coverage for the Ipswich game, and if like the ability to play the bench boost chip sort of like outweighs, the potential Holland or triple captain, Holland in game week 2, I think it's defensible. The problem is like Holland gets a hat trick and everybody captains him, and you start the season on 30 points, right?
Historically, he's done really well in game week 1, right? I remember you and I got off the boat last year and he put a brace on Burnley.
Braced, yeah. And it's before Champions League. He's been off all summer. Like, we know he's going to play. We know he's healthy. It's, but again, I think bench boost game week 1, and then you're just like sitting there rolling transfers for a while because you have a lot of flexibility. I could totally see some validity in that.
Yeah. So like I said, this is the start. It's all going to change. I'm eager to see who we sign. Spurs get a striker. I'd be really tempted to put them in just because we know how goal focused Postecoglou's formation is. If Richarlison goes and we bring someone else in. I do think there's going to be a young Spurs player that breaks through this year, whether it's Jamie Donnelly or like Will Lancashire, Alfie Devine. We've got several that have looked really good in preseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if you do get a 4.0 starter out of one of those Spurs guys.
That'd be nice. Or was that Bergstrom? It's the Swedish guy.
Yeah, Lucas Bergvall.
Yeah. Bergvall. Thank you.
Yeah. What's his price? I didn't even see his price, but
I think he's like 4 or 5.
Yeah, he came off with an injury in the last game against Hearts, but I'll tell you what, he looks like Maddison when he plays. I mean, he will be in the first team for sure. Whether he starts or not is completely out of the question, but he's playing incredible football. He's a Postecoglou player through and through. So he'll definitely be one to, I wasn't even counting him as an academy guy. I was counting him as a first teamer. So he'll see some game time for sure.
Well, anything else on pricing, teams, chips, free transfers, et cetera, that you want to touch on?
No, just that it's early again.
Very early.
Very early. We've got a lot of runway here to set a team, news to come in. So again, I'm not going to stress over this probably until like the last 2 days before the season kicks off. And then I'm probably not even going to think about this until next week when we get a fresh round of news. But it's fun. I'm glad we're back in the saddle. I didn't miss stressing over this stuff, right? But nice to know we had some changes to alleviate some of that stress.
Yeah, I think I was annoyed for like 2 weeks, so then I was kind of missing it. So I agree with you. I'm excited to be back and kind of lean into this new meta of 5 free transfers and some updated pricing that I think will add a lot of variability. I think they did a really good job, honestly. So I'm excited for it.
You should go rogue against the meta, Chris. Go rogue. Put a rogue team together.
Like start taking hits.
No. I'm not saying take hits. I'm saying go rogue. No Holland. No. What they did. There's an anti-FPL Twitter account that does that, right? Like they take like the worst of the starters and see how many points they can get.
Put them in. Yeah. That makes sense.
I love a rogue against the meta.
All right. Well, we've got 3 more weeks to rogue against the meta. Take a look at preseason teams, see kind of how these managers are going to approach lineups, formations, et cetera, et cetera. So for now, I think that's all we have, but I think we will definitely plan to check in again before game week 1 kicks off. Once again, thanks everybody for listening. Just a reminder, please rate, review, and subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your shows. Don't forget to join our mini league as well. I'll put the code in the description for the episode. We're also on social media on X, Instagram, and Threads at FPL_free-hit-pod. Take care. Good luck with the tinkering, and we will talk to you soon.
Wait. I remembered my team name.
Hit us.
Hung like a horse, but it's spelled hung like Hungman's son.
And with that, we leave you.